Gary, what I have here is a ROM chip.
The introduction of the 5 1/4 inch floppy really expanded the market and provided for the big explosion. No question at all.
It's workbench. I guess it must be.
I sure
must
do.
be good material.
I sure do. On top of that, I think it's important to point out that it's important in the other.
The composer can then make adjustments to each aspect of the note's physical characteristics independently and instantly.
It'd be worthwhile just spending a minute talking about another technology that seems to be coming up these days, and that's one of video discs. Ellen, what you have here seems to be somewhat different from Will's previous demonstration. How does what you're doing differ from the music instruction set?
Barons and downtrodden workers, slaves to an underground machine city operating day and night. The drive for efficiency. You mentioned that chip technology maybe is ahead of your ability to design for that technology. I've also heard that your chip technology is kind of ahead of our ability to actually apply it and use the amount of integration you can get on a chip. Is that true?
This is a. You can tell by looking at it, it's rather a choppy scene. And Frank, would you have any comments about this?
Yes, Hero has 6-axis of motion like a Class 3 industrial robot.
I've brought the magenta layer up onto the display so that we can...
In quite a number of ways. We use it in architecture, engineering. We use it in perspective drawing. We use it to study shadows on an urban environment. We use it to study the effect of earthquakes on large...
Classify printers as either non-impact or impact technologies, and within each of those you could, I guess, semi-classify them as what kinds of technologies they employ to put marks on paper. For example, there's matrix within impact and inkjet within non-impact. Within that, there's various cost performance ranges, and then, of course, you'd always have to consider the quality of the print, which is spot.
It is also interactive, demanding answers within a specific length of time, making corrections.
User of computers and computer-aided design, we certainly see an broad application of hardware to solve the software problem. We substitute a great deal of computational capability for clever software design.
Appearing constantly, which compare all the word processors along an axis of 42 features. Well, if you only need 6 of those, then buy the least expensive package that has the six features you need.
Jim, you've got word vision tantalizingly. From battle games to battlegrounds, a simulation can make fantasy possible and reality fantastic. But like other technological achievements, simulated imagery is a tool that can be used to build, or a tool that can be used to destroy. Okay, joining us now is Frank Lewandowski. Frank is senior scientist at SingerLink, and SingerLink is involved in some very sophisticated flight simulation.
And when you do it in a hidden line drawing, you just see this great sea of small lines and planes across the top of the partition systems.
Frank, getting back.
Bits per inch along the radius of the disk. The second one is the number of bits per inch around the circumference of the disk. And the third key parameter is the product of the...
Example of a computing machine. In the late 1800s, Herman Hollerith devised a card punch calculator to speed the tabulation of the 1890 census. The cards were hand punched, but electrically read, a concept that showed up much later in the earliest IBM machines and is still used occasionally today.
John, can you tell us in general terms how a laser printer operates?
Well, a laser...
Punch tape served as an input device, rewound by hand after each use.
Instinctively understand in a part of their brain where they don't have to think through things. They understand red and green. So we've used it on the screen, and indeed, although we make it possible for people not to have to do this if they would object to it, we also use it on the keyboard. We have taken, IBM being the first machine we've dressed, or addressed, both, I guess. We've taken their keyboard and said, yes, it's very fine clay, but it could stand a little modeling. And so I've applied some of the labor.
The trade-offs as you go to faster and faster movement of electrons through the chip in terms of heat generation, do you reach a point where you start to create a problem? Steve. Steve, tell us, how does an architect use computer simulations?
We use...
George, how much weight can that arm hold?
It can hold about 8 ounces extended and about a pound when it's fully retracted.
And what kind of functional use could this arm perform?
Oh, that arm could do things like pick up.
All due respect to WordVision, which is a nifty software package, there are things that WordStar can do that WordVision can't. I'm also told, however, there are things that WordVision can do that WordStar can't. And it's a matter
by redesigning the chip 4 times.
Phil, it's been said by...
What we specify for this, well, what we're saying is a Series C color inkjet is a Type 3 inkjet, which is a drop-on demand. That differs from a continuous flow in the fact that we're able...
What is interesting and powerful in the course is the great flexibility of responses the student can give in terms of constructing proofs that interest him.
Well, industry has been using robotics for 15 years already. These are robots that are designed to do dirty jobs in industry. And they're doing them.
What do you mean by a dirty job?
Well, undesired jobs. Jobs that are hard, strenuous, dangerous.
Is S. Now, we can combine 1 and 3, affirming the antecedent of the conditional in 1 to get the conclusion Q. So we type in 1.
Labs and the AT&T Western Electric locations. It's also been used in the Colorado State University. 2,500 students have gone through that where they've overwhelmingly reported good results, and now it's being run as part of their composition courses.
It seems like it'd be a tremendous teaching tool.
Research and analysis in psychoacoustics and signal processing, we can extend to this miniaturization, which we...
Easy to learn and easy to use. I know those are popular buzzwords, but it should allow you to sit down with a blank screen and with a minimum of fuss and muss create a document. And since most of
tape that was made of the actual forces in an earthquake, and then we play that against the frame that we have designed. An earthquake analysis will probably run for 4 or 5 hours on a computer, whereas the actual earthquake runs for a few seconds. And we're only looking at the most serious part of an earthquake.
Back into your kind of simulations, it's very sophisticated and very realistic, but I assume there are things you still... And it even featured a video game program involving a mouse with a memory, threading its way through a maze to reach a piece of cheese.
So it becomes very, very user-friendly in that case.
We have just a little...
100% with that. I think that, in fact, we do have this network system, which is our telephone systems. I also think there is another reason, in my opinion, we're going to see this very good matching between telephone networks and computers and personal computers, is the integration of voice kind of capability as a user interface within personal computers. And in that case, it makes even more sense then to be able to share basically the same media to transport your information. It's data information, it's text, it's also your voice.
Okay, gentlemen, we're out of time. Means a 2- to 3-fold increase in storage capacity. Joining us now is Alan Shugart. He's one of the pioneers in the disk drive industry. Alan used to work with IBM, then he started his own company, Shugart Corporation, and then he started another company, Seagate. Alan, welcome to the... Assume either a large degree of intelligence or, interpreted another way, programmed behavior, one of the principal criteria for modern robotic systems. Changed horizontally. Once again, the effect is dramatic. This small change in the alignment of data...
Very first disk drive from your previous company, Shugart Associates, and they gave it to me.
Different level, having to do rather with music manuscripting, and perhaps later we can talk a bit about that. But I find this very interesting because it's as Will has pointed out, it's a very accessible medium, and
you can see then I can really roll it up, and I can roll it down, and I can do quite a few.
The data is converted to a photographic mask, and through photolithography, the design is transposed onto the wafer. 5¼ inches in diameter, while bit density increased 39. The trend away from mechanical complexity has brought paper and ink printing to a new level of sophistication. About the material itself, we're talking about silicon primarily in chips. Is that the material of the future?
The right name, as an example, appears in front of you. We can do exactly the same thing here.
The students don't go to lectures in this course. They come to computer terminals. There is no textbook separate from what they learn at the computer terminal. And from the student standpoint, what's very good is they come and go on their own. 7 days a week, 24 hours a day, we're open for business. I have a TA, for example, a teaching assistant on duty Saturday nights, 8 to 11 p.m.
See, at the high school level, how are computers being used there? Just to teach computers themselves, or used in this way to teach other courses?
They're used in both ways.
Frank, do you feel like you're going to reach any kind of mechanical limitations here at some point, or are you going to be able to...
You've got, say, Jim's Word Vision, $50 to $70 range. You've got WordStar, maybe up to $500. How different can word processors be to cover that tremendous price range?
Let's try several.
Paul, there's a tremendous price range in word processing programs. Some purists, John, and maybe Will, you could talk from your end on this too, think that computers and music
They close at times. Some of those new scenes are coming from video disc, and what they're doing is they're actually mixing video scenes and computer-generated scenes.
Runs on VAX computers, and the terminal is a Tektronix 4113 color raster terminal. This is a VAX 780, although the software will work just as well on...
Here the child has complete control of the situation.
Pat, what's your observation on this use of a computer? Acoustics. Did I get that right?
Right. Karma, we call it.
Karma. Gary.
No, it's the comparison that it just did. For example, here, it said that this text, in accordance with a Kincaid readability, was written for 13th grade education level for comprehension.
Even further, I can load in a display of the keyboard itself, so that when I play back Jesu, I can see the parts that were played.
Called a recursive command, the magic procedure is repeating itself, changing as it goes along. That's the entire program that created that variety of pictures.
Okay, Glenn, it's
occurs when the erasable, real-time erasable, just as magnetic recording is real-time erasable, optical media makes its debut, then I believe we will see the exponential decay in time of magnetic recording. Optical recording gives us the promise of over 2 billion bits per square inch. The first
And the second thing that it was designed to do was to test a very large memory.
It really represents, I guess, tens of thousands of man-years of thought about thought. And I think that's the significant difference between computers and music and electronic musical instruments of the preceding years. That is, as soon as a computer language is involved, one has access to a degree of power and
simulations to get involved in things like the environmental impact of a new structure?
Absolutely.
Is that actually do or allow the user to structure or tailor their own environment. The spelling area, there's the word choice, which is very similar to the stylistic points that he just made, and there's a sexist phrase dictionary out there that can be styled locally also. And in fact,
into a slightly unreal domain. For example, I've modeled now the human voice.
The machine that you see printing right here is, it runs at about 6 pages per minute as opposed to 2, and yet the price is only about twice the price of a daisy wheel printer. In terms of spots per inch, the thermal transfer machine is about a little less dense than a daisy wheel, which runs at about 450 spots per inch as opposed to the 200 spots per inch that you see here.
I guess that sort of leads us then in.
Keep getting this dense, more dense, more dense.
Well, we have projected in our strategic plans
in applications of that sort, that you can build a very precise robot that, say, would weld within a few millimeters of where it should weld, or you could use, say, vision processing to figure out where the object is and to manipulate it with very coarse mechanical devices.
Yeah, or as David points out,
like the Pascaline, invented by the French mathematician Blaise Pascal in 1642. The Pascaline stored numbers on 10 little rotating dials. Moving one dial up to 10, moved the next dial 1 notch, and so on. It was the first consistently reliable
CMOS technology comes into its own in this decade. All three of those technologies will be used together.
Phil, as you're aware, Stuart, this is a very special device. It's not a general-purpose computer. But most of the home computers that are available now, like the Commodore 64 or the IBM Personal Computer, have special hardware for sound generation or tone generation. And what you do is you write a program.
The forerunners of modern computers didn't appear until the late 1930s and 1940s. The Whirlwind, of which only a few parts remain, was a massive machine, covering 3,000 square feet and weighing over 3 tons.
Then I can show the modified version. And I can flash back and forth to find out whether or not that is what I really want. And what I'm going to do now is...
The thing about this particular procedure is we can get very different kinds of pictures just by changing the numbers.
the idea is that you get
simultaneous aid and correction, so that it takes the tedium out of.
And down to the piano, and press the button, it'll play through the piece.
Printout of computer-edited copy is routinely checked against the hand-drawn design, still, at present, the final document. If they match,
Boon and find out what the pixel intensity is at that location. I can then go down to the...
They are crucial to us in our design task. Engineering workstations that give the power of 1 million instruction per second computer at the hands of each individual engineer is something that we very definitely can use.
We've heard about the possibility.
And we find that higher and higher levels of integration and software capability.
So this is going to be the kind of discussion we'll talk about, generating the real-world situations with a computer.
The price is now rapidly coming down, helped in some of the future products and some recently introduced ones by the use of the junction diode laser, this little gadget I have here.
And we are selecting either a specific place where you want to put your finger on, or an area.
Whereas on all of these, none of this is video. This is all generated frame by frame in a computer.
Okay, there are other uses of computer simulation.
I think the expectations for the use of computers in school were very high. And along with those expectations, there was concern about the dehumanizing
literate computers that understand what people do. So you can see, for example,
Progress in very large-scale integration of circuits promises even further size
with what you have up there. I would like to show you what we have on the screen there. What we have on the screen there is what I call an electronic Rolodex.
Right. And we can try to get into a turn here, and you'll see the horizon move around. That's pretty much what it does. I'll just go into a stall here and crash so we can get going here.
It'll be interesting to talk to our experts today and see where they think it's going to go. Are we going to stick with mechanical storage, or is it going to become...
The first thing whenever they see a new computer program is to be overly cautious, so they'll move around.
This type of device is going to be replaced eventually by a semiconductor memory device. What are your feelings about it?
But at least one study questions whether there is any difference between a logo-trained and a traditionally trained child. Joining us now is Professor Patrick Suppies.
It's a central processing unit and main memory, or central memory. And it was really
trying to develop electronic controlled components, examples of which we will have on our show today, the inkjet printer and the laser printer, instead of mechanical impact technologies. How do we interface these printers with a computer? Say we have a computer and we want to go about knowing that we
automatically dial the phone. So let's go back to the Rolodex.
And some word processors, in fact, word processors like the little one I was using here, doesn't come on a disk at all. It comes built into RAM.
Per minute. They cover a fairly large range of speed.
Yes.
About the fifth generation project we hear about in Japan, how dependent is a fifth generation computer on increased levels of integration?
A lot of powerful things that it can do. Now, in addition to what you see there, that aids in the stylistic analysis portion of this. Let's talk.
What chip is this?
This is a 4-bit bit slice microprocessor.
Writer Isaac Asimov in 1947 to devise the first 3 laws of robotics. These prescriptions are SRI International and Matt Guerreri, who's an executive with Autobotics here in the Silicon Valley. Where are we in adding smarts to robots?
Well, we are struggling. Sensors are being added to robots today, and they are applied gradually into in industry. There are other applications of robots that would have to have sensors. These are unstructured environments, such as in the military.
Application to all magnetic recording. The thin film materials, which lend themselves so well for magnetic recording, are relatively soft, and therefore they have a wear problem. The rigid disk have the...
We can have the computer list the procedure.
We're actually twiddling with the keys. I guess I could say a couple of things conceptually about it. One of
around the people worry about reliability. What's your feeling on that? Is there a problem?
Color inkjet, and here we have a Type 3 color inkjet today.
How about, say, the first tier, say, I'm choosing between a dot matrix impact printer and a daisy wheel impact printer. How do I make my determination, say, just choosing between those two?
Well, it depends on the quality of output.
Well, I certainly didn't. And I can recall in the days of the 702, we wondered if we would ever sell 30 such systems in the entire United States market. So
that do some aspects of this, but we have what we feel is an integrated system that applies to all the architectural and engineering disciplines in the firm.
Would you use
and it will find the large block and put it in the middle. The robot has a sensor that can sense how large.
One of the two things that a tool like this helps you do, you'd press a key that says Format, and then the yellow one for page appearance. You would get on the screen.
It's up. I can move it down just by pointing on the wheel on the screen.
The same system is used for interior perspectives as well. Interior perspectives turn out to be a very interesting problem because they have a lot more edges, especially the open office sort of environment, and when you do it in wireframe, it gets to be kind of a jumbled image.
Popular impact printers like this daisy wheel still operate much like a typewriter, but with fewer moving parts and much greater speed.
Is not yet in operation. This would be in the future. I mean, by that I mean jobs in hot environment, nuclear power plants and the like. But examples of undesired jobs is handling workpieces in hot environment.
What about
in addition to the graphics, which you're looking at here out the window display, you're also moving giving him all of
get a good deal of their education at home over a terminal because it's inconvenient to go to a campus site.
you do see, as you mentioned in your own course, the possibility that an entire course or maybe curriculum would be taken by a mature student via computer.
Sure.
Matter of fact, there's a ROM Chip of the Month Club now where you can buy your popular songs on a chip instead of on a cassette tape or on a record. This is a simple example, but how does a computer make music? How is it doing this?
Well, computer, if all you want to do is simple word processing. If you're never going to do a spreadsheet and you don't need a database, buy a small machine and a simple package. And I think it's exactly the same in software. You can, there are already...
actually do something that humans can't do. It can twist its wrist around that particular joint. Now,
just to get some feedback on your writing.
Definitely.
Do you think that that people will become a little more dependent upon this and expect it to be very reliable and sort of say, well, since it passed the writer...
And that's made computers a lot more reasonable for schools to buy and also easier to use. So as the technology improves as far as the ease of using it, you're going to see a lot more.
You know that favorite joke?
Massachusetts Institute of Technology in 1956, the machine used a modest 5,000 watts of power.
Device, you can really point to it directly with your finger.
One of the criticisms...
Fourth generation of this particular chip, isn't it?
That's right. The 2901C, we go 2901, and then the 2901A was introduced, B and C, so this makes it the fourth one.
Okay, and what kind of... Come back and meet two personal robots, Hero from Heathkit and Teach Mover from Microbot. That's coming up in just a moment. This is George Oliver, president of George L. Oliver Company, who distributes the Hero 1 robot here in Northern California. And George, maybe you could...
Let me do it. Okay. Y-E-S. Are you sure? Oh, yeah. Yeah. I forgot the eyes. We have 29 points. Oh, great.
Film platters, which is the next generation of platters.
Now, you mentioned, Frank, thick, medium here, and thin film head technology. After computers.
After computers, of course. Computers pay for the bills. But this, I think, is the second generation of a program that was done, if I'm correct, Bruce Artwick, SubLogic.
Mm-hmm.
I saw it on the Apple II, and it looks like it's improved quite a bit since then. Can you get...
So here I'm changing the starting line, the increment, and the number of turns, but I'm leaving the angle at 90 degrees. Okay, we get a little more intricate, interesting picture. Now what happens if we just change that angle? So let's use the same starting number increase the angle to 135, same increment, same number of turns. Okay. Now we have a star-shaped picture, a very different type of image just from changing the angle. Okay. So one kind of thing that LOGO is designed for is to lead kids to explore the computer, explore what will happen with these kinds of forms, and the children could just get a feel for what angles are.
Used here as a training robot, as an educational robot, right?
Yes, he's designed to be used by the student in the laboratory to study
Okay,
robotics.
well, George, thanks so much, and now we'll go back to Gary.
As Stuart joins us on the set, I'd like to introduce Dusty Rhodes and John Hill of Micro.
Technologies be both used in the same computer?
Oh, absolutely. In fact,
Stanford.
Well, let's see. We assume, for example, in our environment that these abstract symbols notation have already been learned. I mean, our activity is really centered around musicians who have studied for some considerable time. And
well, again, you're getting outside my area of expertise, but certainly the chip technology is considered to be very key because of the enormous computational requirements of that type of a system. It's, I think, pretty widely held that you need very sophisticated distributed processing.
The digital form is translated into a signal for amplification, pre-recorded, and played back over audio tape during the performance. A computer that can reassemble the building blocks of a sound wave, providing as much or as little editorial assistance as the user chooses.
Generality, which was certainly not the case in ordinary electronic musical instruments. I mean, look what Will's done here with a personal computer and a programming language and a considerable amount of imagination. So it really doesn't depersonalize music, I think, but rather maybe humanizes.
Rigid micro floppies. It's, as you said, different than the 5 1/4, but has today basically the same.
That it would revolutionize education. I don't really believe a lot of those claims, but I think it has a number of nice advantages for introducing kids to computers, introducing kids to programming, and also that it does have some implications for more general problem-solving types of skills.
Could we do a little...
Flexible enough to take advantage of the capability of a laser printer.
Mm-hmm.
But if the computer can generate the image, then within some very broad limits, the laser printer can generate
anything you can compute.
This type of analyzations.
Warren, where is something like this being used right now?
Primarily in the Bell.
Becomes a publisher, and that means also that the teachers become publishers of their own musical material, and the professional composers can also publish for the audience of people who have the same instrument. So absolutely, yes, it is a...
Absolutely, and in fact, one of the latest technologies that people talk about...
Only right now it's not, because the recording densities that we have that were required in our products don't need that kind of technology. At some point in the future, we would expect thin film heads to be used in our small...
Language is such an enormously rich resource that it must, at any level, enhance the compositional process.
Will, you guys are...
The device is, and here it says, I have the large block, I'll put it in the middle. Now it knows to go back to the previous location for the smaller block and put it on top. I'll let it go on for just...
Well, optical memory that you see advertised in the paper all the time now it's really for archival storage. You write it and then it stays the same forever. And I think that there's a place in computer systems for optical memory for archival storage.
Definitely, the software has played a key role in the evolution of hardware. And in the markets that these various classes of machines service, I think we see that very clearly. In the mainframe area, the more powerful computers with many more peripheral devices and disks and tapes will service multiple users at the same time, and the software has to be massive and somewhat complex to support that. Whereas in the small side, we're seeing a trend towards simpler software, easier to use software that services.
Programming languages like Logo are designed to teach children to make up their own programs, create their own commands, and in general put students in the active role of...
Which has a pair of wings or skis, and on the rear, very difficult to see, but can be seen in microphotographs, are thin film elements that have been deposited. These devices are able to record 12.5 million bits for every square inch of disk surface.
Contact with the media itself.
Herb, we've seen
user, but the user who is sophisticated in the use of information, but not sophisticated at all in the direct use of a computer tool. So we really focused on developing a technology and a total approach for a very intuitive use of a personal computer. And what we have embedded in the HP150, the most visible part is what we call touchscreen capability.
That could be used to do useful things, as you mentioned. It's interesting that the disk drive is really the only part of that.
The difference here is 57 and should have been closer to 28 or less than 28. So it goes into a lot area that there is a precise definition because yesterday's mainframe is today's micro from a performance point of view. But I think that we normally think of the mainframe as being the faster, high-end computer system that we find in scientific research.
Speed output. Our thermal printer here that we have today runs at 6 pages per minute, typically, which is quite fast compared to, say, a daisy wheel, which would be slower, maybe a page.
At almost every level of their education. But there are still doubts over the best way to integrate computers into a traditional curriculum. Replacing the teacher with a terminal changes the focus of learning away from the instructor and to the computer.
It's much quieter, 55 dBA. As far as cost-wise, it would be more expensive, of course, because you are getting that extra speed out of it.
We'll take a look at one of the newest microcomputers, the HP150 from Hewlett-Packard.
I believe there that we are kind of pushing the technology. We're using, as a matter of fact, a 3.5-inch
programs which are available. Gary, I'm told that today there are about 150 different word processing programs you can buy.
With transporting Winchester disks around?
Well, certainly a Winchester disk is much more susceptible to damage and from shock and vibration than a floppy, and that's because the media and the magnetic heads have to stay there all the time, and the heads are in contact with the media. And if you bounce it around too much, you could have some problems, where in the floppy you can take out the floppy diskette itself when you're transporting it. So the Winchester...
An image of the page that you're working with and a list alongside of the various things about it that you can change.
Writers disagree on what effect word processing will have on the quality of our written language. Some writers are concerned that computer assistants may promote dry, bland writing by diluting an individual's style. But others claim that they improve writing ability because they operate at the writer's discretion.
Memory module itself, that's a 1 megabit chip. Now, some people would say that the
ROM inside the hardware here. Now, in this particular Radio Shack 100, it has what it calls a text editor, but I'm not sure, how does that differ from a word processor?
Okay.
Its role really was a circuit tester and a memory tester.
For a while, the problem of the fake apples was thought to be limited to Southeast Asia, but the phony apples have started.
It's also important to emphasize that we've only really begun. You know, your question is right in the sense where we are now will be very different from where we are 20 years from now.
What's triggered the movement in these past few years?
The only component of that system where it's still mechanical. And
say about price performance, but on the other hand, there's also a time factor in that. The $5 calculator you can buy in the Safeway today will do more than the $500 calculator you could buy 10 years ago. So really you have to consider price levels as they change over time and as they change over the market. Because when a company like IBM puts out 600,000 computers in a single year, and as those numbers keep growing, the numbers which a company like ours can amortize its development and other costs over are growing so substantially that it's possible to offer more and still charge less.
So it's really, on some of those points, I think that most of the networking, though, is going to be more in data communications over telephone lines, that is, linking the office with the home and things of that sort. We have a tremendous network throughout the whole world that is based on telephone system, and I think we're going to just see a lot more evolution.
This is the TX0, the world's first general-purpose computer using transistors. And it still works. We'll see a demonstration coming up next. With this, algebraic expressions and the graphic representations of these algebraic expressions. While not usually designed with human characteristics, post-war robots were, from early on, capable of programmed motion.
It's not the end of the line. We're at some point in time in the evolution of of using, say, microprocessors as general-purpose computers, and they're just getting smaller, faster.
Sort of European-type applications. With one print wheel, we can print 33 Western European languages.
How important that technology is going to be, but I think just the notion of storing pictures and operating on those pictures, that's kind of the next frontier.
Herb Lechner has joined us. Herb is Vice President for Information Systems and Administration at SRI International. Herb's got quite a background in computing. It goes back several years. I understand you programmed the ENIAC at one time.
Support RAM so that it can both read and write different bits of the memory at the same time. It takes the data, the 4 bits of data out of this register file and pumps it through this section here, which is the ALU, which is controlled by the instruction decode, which you see up in this section.
Density. How does a user try to figure out which printer is right for him? And we've got 3 printers sitting here, and that doesn't even begin to represent the variety out there. How do you make a determination as to what printer a particular user should buy?
Steve? I think what you'd like...
The robot became a frightening symbol of the future, threatening to transform the world into an over-mechanized, dehumanized society. In heavy industry...
And my own courses at Stanford are meant to be an example of that. And that could well be a course in programming.
Displayed in the Computer Museum's lobby are some of the biggest solid-state machines ever made, supercomputers. The IBM Stretch.
Improve this by adding not just vision, you can have range and touch sensing, not just a micro switch like this.
Down to on the order of 10 pages.
Okay, Gary, well, if you and I aren't replaced by robots, we'll be here again next week for another edition of the Computer Chronicles.
Touchscreen.
Okay, I think that the way we have designed the product, in fact, is by allowing very simply current and existing application to basically use the touchscreen capability. The product...
Do you think that the floppy disk drive was really instrumental?
Things. You can recall, again, just by pointing the application.
Winchester is much more delicate.
Is it something that's going to be up in that direction? LANs have had a lot of problems in just setting up the networks, and they're very expensive. So, but I agree with you.
I agree. See, everywhere we could replace keyboard access by basically pointing directly to the screen.
Help move the K-Pro out of the way, and we could then get to Warren's demonstration of Writer's Workbench. And I understand, Warren, you're really tied in here to a computer over in Hayward somewhere.
Yes.
As opposed to what you're doing.
Oh, I think that the use of logo could be valuable and fascinating for young students. I think that in teaching students about computers, the nice thing about logo is they get a quick and easy sense of how a computer language works. That doesn't mean, for example, that...
in setting off the whole microcomputer revolution?
Oh, there's no doubt in my mind.
Our software is designed to take over where the writing process leaves off. Writing is inherently a creative process that you don't want to interrupt with concerns such as finding spelling errors and looking for redundant phrasing and so forth. So our software takes the files that you've created and runs through a certain...
Replacing the 5 1/4 inch format?
No, I don't. I think there's a marketplace for the smaller size, and I don't know if it will be the 3 1/2 or the 3 1/4 or the 3 or the 3 3/4. There seems to be lots of different formats vying for becoming the standard. There may be more than one standard, but I don't see that they'll ever replace the 5 1/4 inch mini floppy, because the world's programs are written on mini floppies, and you're never going to be able to, in your wildest imagination, transcribe all those programs onto smaller disks. It just isn't going to be done.
Well, the second step really would be doing writing style analysis, which I'll bring up next. That is, if you were to look at writing style books, you'd have a collection of problems.
Okay, real quickly, Glenn.
I think I have a somewhat different view. I view the computer as a tool for the teacher to...
Productions and increased processing capacity. But the future holds more than just a change in the relationship between power, size, and speed. Data storage borrowed the recording technology being used by sound engineers. Computers at Stanford now to teach your course in logic. How do you actually use the computers to teach that course?
I don't give any lectures.
As you can see, this is the view outside as we try to take off here. We'll give a little elevator action here. We can look out the rear window and see us.
Arrays of microprocessors is going to be key in making that happen.
I believe the Japanese have talked about having as many as 100,000.
And one of the things that someone suggested in terms of hardware, and I think it's equally applicable to software, is don't buy more than you need. You don't need some gigantic 32-bit super micro.
The reliability factor of the hardware. This says that the plane is going at 100% reliability, meaning that nothing's ever
program in BASIC or Logo or one of those languages if you like, and then you can produce different kinds of platters here. Can you tell us a little bit about what you got?
Certainly.
I have a brain just like you do, but my brain is a computer. My owner programs my computer for me, and I always do as I'm programmed. I can talk like this, I can turn my head.
Control Data 6600 and the ELIAC 4 represented the most powerful class of computers of their time.
Well, the ELIAC consists of an air-bearing slider.
Some of the recent developments, I guess, in microprocessors, there's quite an emphasis on data communications to mainframes, getting at
Flight simulator, used by the military to train helicopter pilots in air-to-ground combat. Deceptively simple in its visual effects, the simulator requires a complex combination of movement and real-time response to be realistic. Although in appearance, computer...
in the early 1970s, we already had semiconductor memory that was replacing...
2, 4, lines 2 and 4, affirm the antecedent, and we'll get immediately the desired conclusion W.
In the world. And then what you do is you have this orthographic database. You then, from the particular point in space where the eye is, either whether it's my point or whether it's any of my opponents, the point is that we compute the scene based upon those input coordinates.
More easily and quicker than other students. And that individualization is taken account of because the pace of one student doesn't affect the pace of another student, as opposed to a classroom setting. Secondly, the students get excellent opportunities to practice and be corrected in their practice of doing logical derivations and giving proofs, giving logical counterexamples. And that practice, that dealing with material in that elegant way you can do it on at a computer terminal with a good sophisticated program to back it up in terms of checking any kind of proofs the students give. That's a great advantage.
So we have to maintain more clean, more and more
problem as we get more and more into the manufacture of specialized or custom chips.
The person can buy now and use on most of the available word processors and microcomputers that they can buy.
Okay, Wayne, you 8-bit to 16-bit, even 32-bit processors from 16K chips. We even hear talk now of 256K, 4 megabit memory chips. How far can we go in jamming stuff into these computer chips?
Well, I'm embarrassed.
Segue music, Ellen, and I'm going to take advantage of that music to turn to John for a second. And John, one thing, of course, you're dealing with a computer so large we couldn't bring it here in the studio at your Stanford location. One thing you're involved in is music notation. I think you have an example of that in front of you. Show us what that is.
It's an extent
form of publishing, but a very personal one.
Very quickly, we have about a half minute left. Do you find a resistance among professional musicians and composers, or they really love to get into this?
I think, Herb, the answer is yes to all of those questions. There will be more laser printers and they will come down in price. The early laser printers were very fast but also very expensive machines costing hundreds of thousands of dollars.
To walk down nostalgia lane to see the museum and think back to the days when we had an installation team of 17 people sent out to install a computer over a year that my kids handle in their spare time.
Okay, speaking of the new
music that's in there right now, so if I played this it wouldn't sound very pretty. It also tells me what that note sounds like. So if I were composing music, for instance, or just wanted to know where it was, I could tune my ear.
Certainly makes learning...
meant running through everything stored on the tape up to that point. Short of faster tape drives, the only way to make data more accessible was to change the format of the recording medium.
Well, I think we want to differentiate cases. In the elementary school, it's very important to have a relationship to a teacher. One of the paradoxes of American education is that the data are overwhelming, that's the way it should be, and yet class size, on average, is larger in elementary schools than in secondary.
And in military applications of some of these flight simulations. Frank, welcome to the Computer Chronicles.
Thank you. Stuart, yeah, this is a very interesting subject. This happens to be my second great love is aviation.
Organs and synthesizers and who knows what else.
Ellen.
Microfocus, creators of visual programming tools for software development, is pleased to provide major funding for the Computer Chronicles, the story of this continuing evolution.